Welcome. Here we have Michael Seef. He's a professional solicitor, conveyancer, but you're a solicitor, aren't you?
Not just a solicitor, a professional solicitor.
A professional solicitor. Watch out, guys. Anything you say can and will be used against you.
No, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Michael was living in Sydney and he moved up here with his family. And prior to being up here, were you in an apartment or a house in Sydney?
I grew up in a house and then spent a few years in an apartment and a shared house in Surrey Hills before coming up here.
And now, what type of property are you living on?
We live on some land, five acres. A few dwellings on it. We live on it with my parents have the one dwelling, my wife and baby and I have the other dwelling, and we rent out the third dwelling.
Beautiful. And what was that like going from, so were you you grew up in a house, but you were previously in an apartment before you moved on to this large acreage?
Yeah. Actually, in between, I was in a one-bedroom van.
Yeah, right. So this would be significantally larger than that.
Just a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. And what is it like now having to take care of a large property?
Oh, it's a significant amount of work.
Was it when you had it in your mind to live on acreage, is the reality of living on acreage like that? What advice would you give to someone looking to go from an apartment to acreage?
Yeah, you either have to have expendable time or expendable money.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
'Cause time is money, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful.
And so either you've got to be spending a significant amount of time each week yourself maintain. It also depends on like how you want your property to look. If you don't care that there's invasive species and weeds and whatnot growing everywhere and it doesn't look tidy, well then you can spend less time and money maintaining that. But if you want to keep on top of it, if you want the gardens to be looking relatively nice, the lawn to be mowed with some level of relative frequency, you need time or money to do that.
Yeah. And you could probably just decide which parts that matter to you, the land, and which parts you might want to do some rainforest regeneration or something.
Yeah, that's always a good option. Get them to get bodies to come in and plant 3,000 trees in an acre and not have to worry about that again. Yeah,
beautiful. And what kind of attracted you to the career of being? So that you've got two types of representation through property. You've got a conveyancer and you've got a solicitor. Yeah. You're a solicitor.
Yeah.
And what's the difference? What's the big difference between a conveyancer and a solicitor?
I mean, the one has a law degree.
One has a law degree.
Look, in terms of the conveyancing process, you could argue that a solicitor has a better ability to review contracts and understand the legal implications of them. But in terms of getting the property transacted, it's the same process regardless of whether you're a conveyancer or a solicitor.
Yeah.
So it's more about the level of expertise you're looking for in drafting the contract or ensuring you're getting the contract reviewed to a really good standard.
Would it be fair to say maybe one's a little more seasoned, a little more educated?
Look,
maybe that's not the right word.
Look, there are some absolutely amazing conveyancers who are so good at their job, and you'd be in really good hands with them.
Yep.
So I could go down the room like, oh, you got to have assistance. But really, for this process, it's more about have you got somebody who is a really good communicator, somebody who does know what they're talking about and has a relevant level of experience. And whether it's a solicitor or conveyancer, either can get the job done to a really good effect.
And when you say a good communicator, you mean someone that's receptive and just easy to talk to? Because I know some solicitors might make the process a little bit more difficult than it needs to be.
That can definitely happen. And it seems like something of, from the legal profession in the past, you would expect your solicitor to take anywhere between 2 or 3 weeks to respond to you or to review a contract or to do something. And then when they do respond to you, they are responding to you with legalese that's hard to understand. And I think the profession is moving away from that, especially in this field where what clients want and need is clear, easy communication to understand.
Yeah. And sometimes the way the property market works, you need someone who can kind of move quickly to save you money, right?
Yeah. You if you're coming up against other purchasers and you've got a solicitor or a conveyancer who's sitting on reviewing the contract for 2 weeks. That's 2 weeks for somebody else to come in, offer the same amount of money, have the contract reviewed and exchange.
2 weeks for the agent to shop your offer to anyone and everyone. And so there's what kind of attracted you to the profession? Because you're a musician, right? So it's interesting that you've got these, you've got this really arty career and you've got this really
or
professional career.
Either I'm not good enough as a musician to make a full career out of it. But I think as well, a big part of it is when I was working entirely out of music, living entirely out of my work in music, it took a little bit of the joy away from making music. I stopped jamming and creating as much, and I realized over the course of 2 years that this wasn't the pursuit of money that was going to bring a level of satisfaction to my life. So I firstly wanted a cleaner way to make money, something that, wasn't necessarily derived from soulful passion, but something that I enjoyed, something I was good at. And being a solicitor within property law really fit that.
Is it suck the fun out of it, catering to things that you have to do to monetize a music career?
Yeah. I mean, and then playing lots of pub gigs and playing the same stuff over and over.
I'll have to check it out next time I stay up later than 8 o'clock. Mate, I was wondering if we could run through some parts of the contract.
Yeah, sure.
And maybe we could, you could translate them into English.
Sure, I'll try my best.
So you've got, something really common is a 66W. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so in New South Wales, for most residential properties, a contract that you sign will come with a statutorily provided cooling off period of 5 days, which means, if you sign the contract, you pay the deposit, it's all locked in, but you have 5 days to essentially, think about whether you want to get out of that contract.
And you could pull out and keep your deposit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a very small penalty on the deposit, 0.25% of the contract price.
Right.
But, if you don't want to buy the property, that's not much in that regard. Now, understandably for yourself and other agents in particular, and vendors especially don't want to be in an open-ended contract. They want to ensure that they've got that they've signed a contract with somebody who is committed to it and isn't going to pull out, because otherwise they could have taken offers from somebody else perhaps. So a Section 66W cooling off waiver certificate is a certificate that's signed by your solicitor, if your or conveyancer, if you're the purchaser, that says we acknowledge that we're waiving the cooling off period, so there won't be a cooling off period.
And because if someone exchanges with the cooling off period, you then cannot sell the property to anyone else, and you may have paid $8,000 to $10,000 to $12,000 worth of marketing.
Yeah.
And so you're like, do I pull that off and pay another 12 if they pull out? So it's good to do your due diligence. Really do your due diligence before you dive into that, and then you should have the confidence.
Yeah, it's so common in residential property transactions to waive the cooling off period that it almost makes sense if it was the reverse, that it was assumed that there's not a cooling off period unless a certificate was signed which acknowledged a cooling off period. But that's just, I guess, how the market has adapted to legislation which has implemented a cooling off period. The market's just said, well, we don't like that, so we'll get rid of that.
Yep. And could you run through what a 10.7 certificate is?
10.7 certificate is forms as a necessary part of a contract for sale of land in New South Wales. Mm-hmm. It's a planning certificate. It outlines the zoning of the property, what you can do with the property, what's prohibited, and also it outlines developmental controls on the property, whether it's bushfire prone, whether it's got flood development controls. It effectively tells a purchaser, and is more useful to a town planner really, unless you understand it, but it guides what you can and can't do with the property. And
it can't be any older than 3 months, is that right?
3 to 6 months. That's we've done exchanges with 10.7 6 months. but they do need to be audited regularly because there is legislative change within councils as to the zonings of certain properties and updates based off current information.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes sense. If a lot of times, if you get a contract and you just had 5 minutes to skim through the contract, what would be some things that you'd want to check out straight off the bat?
Depends what stage it's at. Mm-hmm. If we're at a point where a purchaser has had offer and acceptance, then I'd want to check to make sure that the contract stipulates the correct purchase price, the correct deposit amount, the correct names on the contract.
Yeah, and you'd be quite far down the track by that point.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, pretty far down the track by that point. But if let's say one of your clients is, and you've said, hey, we're interested in this property, do you mind having a quick look at the contract? We haven't made an offer yet, but we just want to have a quick look before we go further down the process.
Yeah.
I would look for the special conditions, see if there's anything untoward in there. But more importantly, in that circumstance, I'd be looking at the title, trying to assess what kind of easements or covenants the property has, so that I can effectively explain that to your client or my client. And then have a look at the planning certificate, the 10.7, and see if there's, especially in this area, flood-related controls or bushfire controls. Beautiful.
And could you run through land tax adjustment?
Yeah. So if it's a residential property and the vendor lives in that property as their principal place of residence, there'll be no land tax that's levied to that land.
Yeah.
If they don't and it's an investment property, there's a big chance that the vendor has land tax that they need to pay. And the land tax is levied from 1st of January to 31st of December. So if you look to buy a property in July and the vendor pays land tax on that property, and they've marked the land tax box on the contract as adjustable, then you'll have to pay them for the amount of land tax that they pay on that property for that period of July to December, assuming that the vendor has already paid out their land tax. And so that's what the land tax adjustment is.
If they've got multiple properties, they can shift all the land tax onto one. Is that right?
So land tax works on a single holding basis, which means all your properties are accumulated into the amount of your total property value, and your land tax is charged based on that total value. If you have got a single property, if you have one of your properties that you're selling out of that portfolio, you can get your land value and ascertain what is the land tax you're paying based off that property so that you can still do the adjustment.
Okay, perfect. And so a contract, it'll have special conditions and it'll also have standard conditions.
Yeah.
So do the special conditions override the standard conditions?
Sometimes, and most residential contracts do override specific standard conditions. There's usually one of the special conditions is titled amendments to the standard conditions, and it goes through a list of small amendments to the standard conditions. They're not usually very controversial, but it is actually a really tricky area because if you aren't switched onto it, acting for a purchaser, and you might think, okay, it's all the standard amendments to the standard conditions, and they put something in there that you don't go and cross-verify because it normally says amend clause 7.1.1 to read 5% or 1% or 200. If you're not cross-referencing directly and making sure you're going through each one, you could miss something quite significant, which could really give a lot more power to the vendor.
And it's all got to fall within the law, right? Like, because they had the whole thing with animals and not being able to keep animals, and then there was a precedent set where somebody won an argument to keep their dog, and so the law would kind of override any. Yeah,
if there's legislation that expressly necessitates or prohibits something, then that's an area that you can't necessarily contract out of.
And what are some things that you'd expect to see in a contract that would fall in favor of the solicitor, of the vendor, that you'd automatically go and try and check out?
First thing is a release of deposit clause.
Yep.
And it's interesting, there's a massive difference in release of deposit clauses and how they work between Northern Rivers and Sydney. In Sydney, it's almost assumed across the board that there's going to be a really open-ended release of deposit clause that doesn't require the vendor the vendor's purchase to be conditional upon their sale. So meaning the vendor who receives the deposit can just go and use that deposit for another purchase, and that purchase can settle before their sale, which is a risk to the purchaser of the vendor's property, because their deposit has gone from the agent to somebody else's trust account and is no longer actually acting as security for their purchase. It's gone.
Yeah. So
whereas in the Northern Rivers, if there's a release of deposit clause, it's usually predicated upon this, the finalizing and settlement of this purchase, and only then can the deposit be used for another purchase.
Have you seen that play out in the real world?
As in
that situation, like the holding a deposit and passing a deposit to another property.
Oh yeah.
Have you seen it go pear-shaped?
Have I seen it go pear-shaped? I haven't seen it go pear-shaped. No, I'm aware of the risk. But I haven't seen it go pear-shaped.
And do you have any crazy stories that you've seen? Have you have any wild stories about things going pear-shaped, perhaps?
Yeah, there's a couple. The craziest story that I've come across was with the first firm I worked for, and obviously I can't say names. I actually don't even remember any of the names, but I do remember the story.
Yeah.
But we were acting for the vendor at a really big, beautiful property in Byron Bay.
Yeah.
I think it overlooked Watergoes. It could be one of those ones.
Yep.
And there was a hot shot purchaser that came through, offered a significant amount of money, paid a really significant 10% deposit on that, and wanted early occupation of the property before settlement. And he agreed to release unconditionally the deposit to the vendors to take early occupation. And then settlement comes around, and this guy wasn't ready to settle. And this drew out.
And he was living in the property.
He was living in the property.
Yep.
It drew out for a couple months. And in that time, he managed to keep the vendors at bay by offering another $172,000, another $200,000. Kept offering him more and more money, just to essentially kick the settlement down the road.
Yeah.
And then eventually the vendors just had enough and had to try and get him out, which was a difficult process.
Yeah.
So effectively terminate the contract and get him out of the property. The problem is once somebody's in the property, it can be a little bit difficult to remove them.
You can't just drag someone out of their place of occupation.
Not really, and especially if it's understood to be a lease. So you got to be really careful that there's no insinuation that this person's residing there as a lease.
Yeah.
A license to occupy is the correct terminology to ensure that you as the vendor maintain a certain level of rights to be able to get the person out if they don't settle.
Is there any way to allow early occupation for someone and sort of safeguard yourself?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you can safeguard yourself through words, but practically speaking, if somebody's in the property and they don't want to get out, well, you kind of need to get some kind of an order to have them removed before the police will do anything to,
You got to go through a process.
You got to go through a process. But the craziest part about this is when they did eventually get him out, and I think they did so by eventually being able to change the locks and get him out that way. They went in there and they found guns and machetes and...
Good Lord.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Who is this guy?
Fortunately, I can't remember his name.
Stay safe out there, kids. If you're interviewing a solicitor to work on your behalf, there's people out there that have never... they might be purchasing their first property and they want to choose someone that's really going to help them. Is there anything that you'd look out for, or any red flags that will pop up or green flags that will pop up when making a selection?
Yeah, I think try and trust your intuition when you have a chat with somebody. Is this person going to help me feel held through the process?
Yeah.
Because you can have a conveyancer or a solicitor who, might be really good at their job and will do a really good job, but they won't communicate with you in a way that helps you understand what's happening at every step of the process.
Yeah.
They won't
Not make you
give
feel
you
bad
timely
for asking questions.
Yeah, and won't give you timely updates. All of these things, especially as a first home purchaser, you want to feel held through that process, and not feeling held can feel incredibly stressful.
And there's probably a lot of things that they don't understand, and you need someone who's going to give you the time of day to really make sure that you understand what you're about to spend $1 million or more on.
Exactly. I mean, look, the process of conveyancing is not rocket science. It's not all that difficult.
Yeah.
What it comes down to really is, have you got somebody who's a good communicator, who's willing to give you the time of day and be patient with you and kind with you and help you through the process.
And your experience and your advice, like you would have seen, is there any examples of things that pop up in a contract that some people might be scared of that are fine, and things that pop up in a contract that you'd think would be fine that you might need to take a bit more seriously?
Yeah, especially some clients don't read the contract at all, as they should. I'll never tell them that don't. I always will say, read the contract and come to me. Like I'll advise them on the contract. I'll say, these are all the major points and bring their attention. But this isn't a substitute for you reading the contract. And some people will go and read the contract and they'll just get caught on wordings of things that, without understanding what they mean, sound really alarmist.
Yeah.
And so
you can translate them, right?
Yeah, I translate them and then express how
from English to English.
Something that doesn't really come up ever.
Yeah.
So that's the process. That often happens with somebody who is a little bit more of a really conscientious purchaser who does want to really be across every aspect of it. And which is fair enough, because it's a huge, huge investment buying a property.
100%. And you just kind of illustrated an issue that came up after exchange. How often do issues come up after exchange? And is there anything you can do to prevent issues from coming up?
Well, I mean, we just dealt with an issue together that came up after exchange.
Yeah, that was a weird one.
Yeah, the ones, and this was a classic example of what happens and exactly why people do a pre-settlement inspection. But we went and did the pre-settlement, or you went with the clients and did a pre-settlement inspection, and they'd taken the water filter, a few $1,000 water filter. They had taken out the oven from like the specific cabinetry. Yeah. These are things that would be considered as an inclusion.
Yeah, and because they're fixed or fitted into the property.
Exactly. Yeah. You got a solicitor mind right here.
It's just because I'm hanging out with you. And they put things as exclusions from the contract and then tried to sell them back.
Yeah,
which is a little bit odd as well.
Yeah.
But you protected the client by?
Well, it was at the end of the day, it was just advocating for what the rights are. And the rights are that, all the inclusions need to be there. There was also a bunch of debris that was left that they hadn't cleared. So, all the inclusions need to remain on the property. Debris needs to be removed. Rubbish needs to be removed. And they hadn't done that. And we just said, before settlement, we need this, and this to happen. Yeah. It ended up being negotiated through the agent because you guys are a lot quicker onto that stuff often than a lot of solicitors.
But then we backed it up by putting it in writing.
And then we put it in writing, and then it just required, the vendor solicitor just say, yep, we agree. And we did a small adjustment to the price at settlement, and it was dealt with. That's the main issue that comes up. Other issues.
But it's all black and white, right? Like each side, when it comes down to the contract, it's you kind of know legally where you stand and what you can do.
I mean, I also was acting for a vendor in a situation where the purchaser wanted the really expensive Sub-Zero fridge. They thought it was an inclusion. We thought it was an exclusion.
Was it standing alone? Was it fixed into the property?
It was bolted to the upper end of a bracket to provide support. And it was actually fell into a little bit of a gray area of what would be considered an inclusion or an exclusion. Now, had I known it had brackets, just to avoid any doubt, I would have marked it as an exclusion, just for the avoidance of any doubt.
Is that a good question that you can ask as a vendor solicitor? Is there anything that's fixed to your property or even remotely fixed to your property that you want to take with you?
Absolutely. I ask it to every vendor because you don't want to be in a situation like, oh shit, I could have just specified that and we wouldn't be in this situation, or I wouldn't have to give it up. So we had that other one where there were all of those statues fixed into the ground. That they wanted to take with them. Yeah.
Do you know, I recently also found out that they came from the previous owner.
Wasn't that the same one?
No, that was
a different one. Okay.
Yeah. There is some grey areas, right?
Yeah.
So you want to get pretty clear on that. And that could be for us negotiating as well, like include this, and make it part of the offer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so, I'm a buyer's agent and I don't want you to pander to me, but do you think that buyer's agents can help or hinder the process?
For me, in my process, definitely help.
Yeah.
There are a lot of aspects where if I'm looking for the client's sake, a quick outcome to resolve a matter, it's often like it happens quickest if it's agent to agent, buyer's agent to selling agent, and with the instructions you guys get from your clients, you can hash things out much more quickly generally than if I'm waiting on a response from a conveyancer or a solicitor and they're waiting to get instructions. That process is just slower.
Yeah.
And then from what I see in what how you deal with your clients, that's pretty invaluable in terms of holding them through the experience. I know that you've not only in terms of how you've held that space for them, but also at push comes to shove, people also want to find a monetary benefit, and knowing how to go through that negotiation process. I've seen a lot of purchasers who have really buckled when it comes to making offers and could have really used support.
And they reach out to you sometimes, right?
Oftentimes they're like, oh, what do you think about this plan? And
it's hard to advise on
It's hard to advise them. I'm not a negotiation expert.
And you just weren't a part of that part of the process. You haven't spoken to the agent.
Yeah.
You don't know who else is involved.
Yeah. And so there's definitely a lot of monetary potential upside in having a buyer's agent who knows the agents, knows who's in the market for what, knows how to, keep you cool in an offering process to ensure the best outcome. I mean, at the end of the day, though, if somebody really, and I'm sure you'd tell me, if somebody is desperate for a specific property, then that will obviously change your negotiation style.
Yeah.
But then also understanding what is the client's temperament to best match a negotiation pathway is, that's a big part of your job.
It's ultimately, at the end of the day, we're both tools, right? Like we're kind of like
I'm not a tool.
Chat GPT for our clients, I guess. It's probably a bad way of I'm a tool. What advice would you give to someone who wanted to get into property conveyancing?
What advice? Someone who wanted to do conveyancing?
Yeah, someone who's in school and they're like, you know what? I want to be like Mike.
Become an agent.
Become an agent. Why is that?
No, it depends. It depends. I think there's more grifting definitely to be a successful agent. And I don't mean that in a bad way at all. As in like you've got to just have such a desire to constantly pick up the phone and liaise and negotiate, or liaise and just explore opportunity and just really put yourself out there. Mm-hmm. Depends the kind of conveyancer or solicitor you want to be. If you want to just go work in a busy conveyancing practice and sit at your desk and do conveyancing work, and you can do a lot of that and you'll get a lot of work, and you don't necessarily need to engage too much with even clients in certain circumstances. But if you want to build a business for yourself, then the best advice I'd have is get your qualifications and then meet people like yourself who can really help open the doorways to getting clients and helping. I mean, you've been absolutely instrumental in helping me build my reputation in this area. So, create networks and relationships in the industry so that you can get across to people the kind of person you are, the kind of work that you do, and that's the best way to build anything.
But you also provide a great service, right? Because do you remember, I don't know if you remember, but so obviously, you're not working 9 to 5 because do you remember when I called you Saturday morning a couple months ago and I was like,
I hope my boss doesn't hear just that snippet and then doesn't hear this next part. You're not working 9 to 5.
we can work that out later. But I called you, I think at like 9 a.m. or 8 a.m. or somewhere around there on a Saturday morning because a client just decided they wanted to attend an auction at the very last
happening
minute.
at 11 a.m.
And it was an 11 a.m. auction.
Yeah.
And you talked them through. We found out that there was no other bidders there and that it was going to be a great strategy to get to the auction so the owner can watch the auction fail and see that the best buyer in the market is standing right in front of them. Mm-hmm. And to do that, you turn the contract around and, 2 hours or whatever, advised, had everything agreed with the other solicitor and, went and made an amazing purchase for the client. So, invaluable.
I mean, I anything for you.
And do you have any advice for first home buyers?
Get a good broker in. Like find a broker.
Mortgage broker?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's important because that's one aspect of it that you want to worry about least. And
because the banks just want to keep you in house. That's all they care about, right?
The banks ideally, it's the banks that end up paying the broker's fee in the vast majority of circumstances.
Yes. It's a free service.
So it's a free service, and I've seen the difference between a good broker and a shit broker, excuse my language, and it's the difference between feeling like, at least on the monetary side of things, that's all sorted versus I've had a broker effectively, shit the bed and
so interview a couple of brokers.
Best get referrals. Get some referrals.
Yeah.
Because as well, when you get a referral, I know that when I'm referred, and it's not that I give the same level of service to all clients, but there's an extra little bit of like reputational drive with a referral because, well, this person's referring to me. There's a little bit of your reputation on the line, as well as mine. Yeah. And there's that real drive for
you do a good job, you're going to strengthen that network.
Yeah, exactly. So get a referral and have the finance side of things sorted out. Have a conveyancer or a solicitor who you feel will bring you through that process in a comfortable way.
So get a good team.
Get a good team. And then if you're not, and if you just feel like you got no idea about how to find the properties or no idea about how to navigate a negotiation process because it's your first time, well then reach out to somebody like yourself because you'll make your life so much easier.
And do you see a difference between the way a non-confident buyer operates versus a confident buyer?
Oh, yeah.
You see that on the daily?
Yeah, I mean, non-confident buyers need a lot of reassurance.
Yeah.
They are more likely to ask questions.
Is it the first home buyers that have a little less confidence, or do you?
Not always. No, some first home buyers are like, cool. I trust this person. And I think it's just more about how you engage with the world, whether whether you feel and what your history is with professional services or people helping you out with things. It's like if you've been burnt, that'll really inform how trusting you are in the process. Ideally finding if you are a non-confident buyer and you're not working with people that you feel like are going to hold you well, that'll spin you out a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've got to be able to, if you're working with a non-confident buyer, understand that internally. You don't need to address it.
Give them the space they need.
But give them the space they need because, I deal with countless property transactions, but this is the first or second or third in their whole life that they'll do. So, yeah, that's important.
Is there any bad advice that you routinely hear around property?
Bad advice. ChatGPT advice sometimes.
Yeah.
No,
What do you think the biggest letdown with chat? Because a lot of people, you must see a lot of that, right?
Well, there's a massive confirmation bias. Like ChatGPT is designed to give you the answers that you want to hear because it kind of it panders to you. I mean, and I've seen this in difference between my partner's ChatGPT responses and my ChatGPT responses. My ChatGPT responses are more likely to be optimistic and, you know, positive attitude, whereas hers are more likely to feed back
reaffirms.
Reaffirms any concerns or queries that, you know. So it has this, it's almost like this dual personality that you can get between. And so if you've got a ChatGPT that's reflecting back to you, it'll reflect back to you with a confirmation bias. And then if you hold tightly to that, you know, I've had clients, you know, respond to me with copied and pasted ChatGPT analysis of something, and it misses the mark because the client doesn't know how to, you know, frame the question correctly to provide an unbiased answer.
They probably haven't even read the response.
Yeah, but in terms of like bad, what I'd like to hear from you. What bad advice have you come across?
Look, we hear a lot of, it's not the right time to buy. We're going to wait till the market gets better. Like that's something that we hear a lot. And the funny thing is when you hear something like that, you know, because at the moment we're at a period where the interest rates are slowly, incrementally, it sounds like they're going to rise a couple of times, right? And I hear so many buyers say there's going to be, the number of times I hear people say there's going to be blood in the water. There's going to be blood in the water. The market's going to drop and we'll buy then. And if everybody is planning on doing that, you know, like if everybody you talk to is like, we're going to wait until the prices drop, then how are the prices going to drop? Because everybody's waiting for the prices to drop so they can buy. So I think, look.
So people giving economic advice when they actually don't understand how the property market shifts.
I don't have a crystal ball. You don't have a crystal ball. Who knows? But like the advice that I give to clients is especially if you're buying a home, if you're buying an investment, you know, you might want to weigh a little more up. But even if you're buying an investment, you're creating a portfolio. And if you're going to buy into a stock market, you don't, who waits for crashes, you know?
I mean, if there's a crash and you happen to have some expendable cash for something, that's great. That's great time to put in. But you don't want to sit around with your money doing absolutely nothing.
And if you need a home for your family and you have the money to buy one and you've got a good property that is fair value in the market that you're in and you can service the loan without going bald or grey, go live in your new home, you know? The market's going to go up and down. But if you look at the market since the 80s, it slowly trends up no matter what it does. And if it happens to have this crazy crash that pulls us back like an all-time crash, then we're all screwed anyway. So... whatever, you know, go buy your house.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, interesting. I don't deal with any of that because generally people are already deciding. They're already committed to wanting to buy a house, and so they're not at the point in their thought process of do I want to do this or not. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Because by the time they get you, that you're reviewing the contract.
They're further along.
Well, you'd think it would be the same with us as well, because people, you know, they employ us to find them a property, but And I get it because it's such a huge thing. But I think, like, how could you possibly know that in 6 months you're going to get a huge discount? And if everybody's thinking that they're going to get a huge discount in 6 months, that tells me that there's multiple buyers waiting for the same thing. And that is competition. That's what pushes price up. So, you know, just because people might be in a real bind where they do have to sell and they put it on the market, but the market's still going to dictate the price. Just because they have to sell doesn't mean you're going to pick up a $3 million property for $2 million if there's other people waiting around for the same pain anyway.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, I think the way I think about it is if somebody has the funds to purchase something and they like the property, and especially if they're going to live there, don't be so attached to whether you could have got it for 100,000 less in 6 months or not, because you could have so just as easily waited till a time where other people were ready to jump at that, and all of a sudden the price is going to be, negotiated higher because of competition or whatever it is.
Have you ever spoken to someone who's upset that they bought a property 10 years ago?
One person. Oh, 10 years ago. 10 years ago now.
10 years ago, right? If it's going to be your home and you're going to live there.
10 years ago. No, even if you're not going to live there, if you bought a property 10 years ago, you're having a good time about it today.
Yeah.
You're not thinking about, wow, I could have got it for $30,000 cheaper if I had waited 6 months. You're like, thank God I just got into that, because now it's worth 2-3x
what it was.
Yeah.
Even people that bought 5 years ago, even people that bought during, like we bought during the peak of COVID, and then we bought something else, and it's great,
Did you buy in the Northern Rivers peak COVID?
No, Sydney.
Okay, Sydney, yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
I was going to say, because peak COVID was not the time to buy in the Northern Rivers.
No,
if there was a time not to buy that, like looking back historically, easy to look backwards and say that wasn't the time, but that wasn't the time.
I mean, if anybody's going to tell you that crystal balls don't exist, wouldn't it be all the economists that said it was going to crash during COVID and it skyrocketed?
Yeah.
Like, anyway.
But it also makes sense because people wanted to get out of cities. During that time.
I still think they do. I think that we're seeing the same migration, but just not at such a crazy pace. I mean, 50% of the people on our books are local, and the other 50% are usually from Brisbane, Melbourne, or Sydney.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And that's not like
Exhibit A and B right here, right?
And that's, I don't think that's gonna. I don't see cities becoming more tempting to live in, given the rising costs of living, given the likelihood of
the culture friction,
and as well the ability for governments to do things like lockdowns. Like I can't help but to feel that's probably going to happen to some degree again in within our lifetime, and if it's already kind of shifted a mindset for a lot of people.
Do you miss Sydney?
I miss my family and friends.
Yeah.
I miss going down to some of the beaches there. That's
the harbour beach is pretty awesome.
The harbour, yeah. Especially if you like sharks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, look, I love how you can just kind of plunge into water there. But at the same time, like you could pop down there every quarter or every once a month.
I do. Yeah.
Well, mate, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate it. I feel like we got a really massive amount of your brain power just then. So thanks so much for coming down.
Thank you very much for having me. Cheers.
Thanks, buddy.